It's been a while since the last video. Busy with work, snowing outside, all that good stuff. But the subframe is bolted up. The spacers are machined. I'll show those a little later. The plates are in and welded on both sides. The only thing I have not done is weld the bottoms of each of these under here. I'm waiting to get a rotisserie over here to flip this whole thing upside down to weld all that, and then put the gusset plates on. Gusset plates are going to go on both sides. The only issue I have is on the inside there's about a 3/8 step from the frame, from the old frame to the new frame. So I need to figure out some way to make a small finger brake to press these to kind of break them around that corner and get that to work. It shouldn't be a big deal. Let's see. Welds are all finished on the outside and the top. The only thing I'm going to do on the outside welds is I am going to flatten those out, which I did compensate for that when I welded them and left a little bit of gap, so they are pretty flush, so that when the gusset plate gets put on the outside, it'll sit flush to everything. What else? Since I'm running an S13 diff and an S14 subframe, I don't know if the S14 has bushings in the front that you press out, but the S13 doesn't. But when you put these bolts in for the S14 all the way, they bottom out before anything's tight, so I have to machine some spacers, get the snout where I want it, machine spacers, and put everything in there and bolt it up, and it'll be ready to go. As far as anything on the engine and transmission, haven't really gotten anywhere with that. I did pick up a set of IS300 fans for the radiator. The only thing I have to do is make an adapter plate because the mount screws for the Mark IV Supra, which is what this radiator is out of, don't line up. But luckily all the tabs miss each other and they sit in between and off to the side, so I'll end up making a nice shroud for it, breaking it on the sides, getting everything to fit up. And I guess these fans, I actually bought these from a guy who was replacing the fans in his IS300 for slim fans because he had a bigger radiator and a turbo and everything else, and he literally had almost no room in the front. But since this guy stepped back so far, everything should fit okay. There's the throttle body from the other video. As far as offering a service on doing that, someone asked. I don't have access to that lathe anymore, and the only lathe I have is a little tiny 7x12 mini lathe. So trying to chuck that throttle body up wouldn't work. Trying to think what's next. Probably getting the rear frame rails trimmed up, getting the fuel cell mounted, getting the suspension arms on, cycling the frame up and down and letting all the control arms work and taking measurements. I built this little, I don't know what you call it here basically built this, I know how to show how this thing works. It has kind of a little swivel mount up top, and it basically, it slides in and out, so I can build something to attach here and attach up there, cycle the suspension and take some measurements and see what the actual suspension travel is going to be and everything else. I skipped Fortune Auto. I was talking to those guys about getting a kind of custom set of coilovers made for this, and the gentleman I was talking to just really didn't seem interested in even trying to help. And so I ran across a video one day when I was just watching YouTube and found a suspension company that had built some stuff for a guy who had a full billet, some kind of bolt-in inboard suspension billet piece for his 240Z, I think it was, and it was Viking suspension. So I shot those guys an email, and the dude was super psyched to try to help me out because they have a set of coilovers that fit a C5 Corvette. So on the bottom of the coilover, where you would usually have an eye on anything else like these guys, I don't need an eye on the bottom. I need the fork style that basically straddles. Where's it at? Because I'm using the GTR 300Z uprights, I need a piece to straddle this, and then I'll end up building a rear upper control arm that'll basically clear the coilover and everything. Because that's why the coilovers are so tall on these, because when they mounted down here, they had to clear the rear upper control arm before you could put a McPherson spring on the back. Or not a McPherson spring. I just think of McPherson struts as having giant springs, so the rear shocks on the 240s had the big springs, bigger springs, but like I said, they had to get above this rear upper control arm before you could put the spring on it. So with mine, I'm not going to have that issue because I will end up building a rear upper control arm that will clear the spring and everything and still be able to function. At least that's the plan. All right. This was more covered on Instagram than I did cover it on YouTube, but here is the downpipe. Everything's fit up. The only thing I have to do is punch the hole for the O2 up here and punch the hole for the wastegate dump. I found out if you see a lot of 1J downpipes, you'll see they weld a flat piece of steel onto this. It's just a straight piece, big chunk they just weld right there. This probably isn't going to make a huge difference, but I found the dimensions of a piece of 2-inch Sked 80 pipe, 304 stainless, was pretty close to the OD of this, and then tapering it down inside the turbine housing over here. So when this thing all goes together, I'll flash a picture up and show you what it looks like from Instagram. But basically what I did is went in and contoured everything inside here. I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of dark. Let me see. Just took all the, transitioned everything so it's nice and it's a good flat from the turbine wheel straight out to the exhaust. Not sure if that's gonna make a huge difference, but small details, I guess. So, other than that, that's it. All right. So, here are my spacers. So they were going to be one thickness the whole way down, but then I realized that these are Voodoo 13 subframe bushings. They go about halfway down and then they taper in smaller on the bottom. So that's why this bottom half is turned in a few thousandths more than the top. And then the taper up here basically ensures that when they're snug down, everything's centered, because that, you know, it's almost like a lug nut with this. I think these were 60-degree tapers on there. So yeah, that's those guys. They're all in and done. So the other thing I realized is once I get the suspension good on the back, and I put the cab back on this thing and start getting ready to make the main hoop and stuff like that, is I don't have a high enough ceiling to take the cab off. Once the hoop's in, the cab cannot go on or come off in the shop. It's going to have to be taken outside. And I don't know how the hell I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll put a hitch on the back of the truck and put the cherry picker arm on that and just pick it off there and then roll it back inside. I don't know. We'll see. Slowly but surely. Yeah, it's kind of slow going. Snow's almost gone. the Death 10. It's a nice day out though. Cab's ready to go. Alright, I remember in one of the other videos I was going to explain how these centering gauges work. These are Mo-clamp centering gauges. If you're in the body shop industry, you're familiar with Mo-clamp. That's their logo. And what these did is, before there were lasers and things like that, you can see all they're all graduated. They have, man, this thing is, they have inches on one side and millimeters on the other. And what you do is set your arms for however, usually they were set on the sides of frame rails, inside or outside of frame rails. And what they do is they both move in and out the same. So what you would do is set these up, bring them both in, and obviously this is just really close together to show how they basically work. They would hang on a frame, so you'd have a car on a frame machine or something, and you would basically get down and look at these pins and line these pins up down the frame and see if it was straight. But nowadays with lasers and everything else, these are pretty much old dinosaurs. But for a DIY home person that's building frames in their garage or doing something like that, they work just great. Especially, I bought a green laser, so that's nice because you can set these up on the frame and then shoot the laser down the frame and basically line up all the pins, and that's what I did to get this thing centered on this. There's the rest of it over there. And what the different pieces are is, this is the tram gauge. These two pieces here. And if you're wondering about a tram gauge, it's in the first or second video I made for the truck. There's different arms over here for longer. And then this was for strut towers. Because what you have is you have two pins on here, and you would center these on your strut towers. This would go around, go under the car, and then you could line up all your gauges, all these guys, with this one in the front and something in the rear, and that would tell you if the strut towers were lined up, if the frame was tweaked, if anything was out of whack. So it's a pretty cool set. It was pretty expensive when they came out, but I picked this up for a steal from a Snap-on guy who took it in on trade, and it has helped me immensely in building this frame. So that clears that up if anyone had any questions about those. And there are no videos. I have not seen any videos on YouTube about the Mo-clamp centering gauges, probably because it's such a specific tool and a lot of people probably don't have them in their garages. But if you find an old body shop closing down or something like that, you might be able to find someone getting rid of a set for a couple $100, and hell, it's worth it to just have it. If you use it once, it definitely saves headaches from measuring and everything else. All right, sweet.